the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David chats with legendary composer Charles Fox. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we've got the next part of my interview with composer Charles Fox. In light of his countless achievements in film, television, and recording, Charles recently received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. His career has seen him work on many of the most popular theme songs and soundtracks of his era, from Happy Days to Wild World of Sports to Love American Style. And he's received Oscar nominations for his compositions on The Other Side of the Mountain and Foul Play. Back again after the break to chat more about his incredible life and career is none other than composer Charles Fox. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I think we've really kind of set the stage now, and I want to start moving through some of these other projects that you started working in. You start actively working and writing. And I think maybe your first big break was it when you got to write the theme for Wide World of Sports, and if so, how did that come about?
Just fortunately, I was working in New York and doing all kinds of different things. I was doing commercials. I was doing rock and roll arrangements because it paid some money. I got to work with the Tonight Show with Skitch Henderson. We took over the band, and I wrote a lot of music for the Tonight Show. When the show went on and off the air, I'd write these little station break materials.
Which host?
Johnny Carson.
Johnny, okay.
Johnny Carson, yeah. And actually, if you remember the scene that's all over the history of television, throwing the tomahawk, Ed Ames, you ever see that?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Okay, well, I won't repeat it then, but he throws a tomahawk at it. He was playing an Indian on television, and Daniel Boone. He was
okay.
more than you and I, but he was playing an Indian. And I arranged the songs that he sang there. He had a big hit, Try to Remember was a song. Try to Remember a Kind of September from the Fantastics. Anyway, I arranged the song, and then we rehearsed it for the band, and then someone hands them a hot tomahawk. They bring out this big background with a carving of a picture of a sheriff or a cowboy. And he says, he gave me a tomahawk to throw the tomahawk. And he never threw a tomahawk. So he threw it and it kept bouncing off. And after he did that 10 times, about to give up, a stagehand came, turned it the other way so the point was facing him. He threw it. It stuck in to 20 feet away, and they marked the spot. And then for the show, he sang and they gave him the tomahawk, and it put it to you this way: he circumcised that cowboy. So it was a hysterical moment. It was black and white television, so Ed tried to go over there to pull it, and Johnny knew the value of a good laugh. He wouldn't let him go and pull it out, and he made all kinds of comments. Anyway, when they talk about the great moments in television history, invariably it's one of them. It's just a riotous scene. And I happened to be there. But Wide World, I got off the subject, I'm sorry. Wide World of Sports, I got the opportunity. There was, no one knew that sports could be on television in the afternoon in a variety of different events. And so they thought it'd be off the air in a minute. Instead, it stayed on the air for 35 years. And 2 years later, ABC did put Monday Night Football on the air, and they had no thought that the women of America would put up with husbands watching television, football on a Monday night. Well, of course they did, and I think women enjoyed them. And anyway, I got to write the theme for Wide World Sports. So along the way, I did a lot of the Goodson Todman shows, What's My Line, To Tell the Truth, Snap Judgment, a couple of others, I forget. And so that was my beginning of television experiences. And
now, I know maybe some of those jobs weren't the ones that necessarily filled your soul, but I mean, do you look back on those themes and those times of doing that type of work fondly?
I do. I was making music. When I was paid to make music. Those shows I recorded in London. I used to go to London, work with the orchestras there. They were on the air, and people knew the themes. They knew the song, da, 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 to tell the truth. And that was my music was being heard. There's nothing in the movie, by the way. Henry Winkler and I got together at his house.
For Happy Days.
Happy Days, in the film about me. And at one point he said, "So did you ever feel that with your background in classical music, that you missed it, that you had given up classical music to write?" I said, I felt I was the luckiest guy in the world. I was being paid to write music, and people were loving it, and I had lots of hit records with those songs.
Mhm.
Well, some of my television themes became big hit records. They're still on the air many years later, 50 years later. They're still making commercials out of some of my songs in television. Then when I had the opportunity to do my first ballet, I jumped at that. That was for the San Francisco Ballet. Michael Spune was the choreographer. He was the artistic director of the San Francisco, very prestigious company. It was the first great ballet company in America. And it was, yeah. And Michael asked me to do a ballet based on a Native American theme. And I said, that's all I want to do now. So I put aside all my other work. I told my agent, don't even call me. I don't know what I'm turning down. I just wanted to work on this. So I did a lot of research on American Indians and Native American. I listened to music. Michael and I went to a reservation in Montana to see the Blackhead Indians. I'm sorry for a powwow. I went to meetings of the American Indian movement with Russell Means. I fully immersed myself in order to prepare myself to write a work of my music based on the culture of Native Americans. And we did a ballet called, it was originally called Richard Oakes. We called it A Song for Dead Warriors. And it's about following a young Native American from his birth to death, violent death. And that led to my doing a ballet, and that played around the world. It actually, PBS filmed that ballet for the Great Performances Series, Ballet in America, and it won the Emmy Award for Best Classical Programming in 1984. So that was my return to classical music. And then I did a ballet based on Zorro. I had a new ballet this year based on my Latin music called Salsa Till Dawn. And that led to, I did an oratorio based on the words of Pope John Paul. He was my lyricist, Pope John Paul II, who was a great man. And I wrote an oratorio based on his words. I conducted the Polish National Opera Company in Warsaw. We had 250 people on the stage. And then the Polish government asked me to write a work honoring the 200th birthday of Chopin. And I wrote a work for one of the great Polish pianists, Leszek Mozart. And I asked my friend Eddie Daniels, who's a great American clarinetist, to be part of that. So I wrote it for those two, plus an orchestra. So I combined all those things in my life. Now I'm working on a Broadway musical. I just completed actually with Alain Boublil. You may not know his name, but he wrote a little show called Les Miserables. Les Mis, in other words. He also wrote Miss Saigon, and we just completed a show called Ain't That Jazz?
Oh, wow.
So my work continues.
And after those television jobs, if I remember correctly, you broke into the film world with your score for The Incident. What events led to that break coming for you?
I was introduced to Larry Pierce, who was a director. That was the second picture, and we hit it off. And he asked me to do that picture. And actually, there was my credit wasn't music composer, it was scored by, because there's a fellow who wrote a song who was influential in getting the picture shot or something. And he became a kind of a rock and roll star. Terry Knight was his name. He did the song. I did the score, and Larry Pierce and I became good friends. To this day, we're good friends. Larry's 93, living in, I'm going to see him for dinner next week. he lives in Palm Springs. He was the one who brought me then to California to do Goodbye Columbus. And that was the one that brought me to Hollywood, so to speak. And that was after I did Barbarella in New York, as I mentioned before. And while I was out here doing Goodbye Columbus, Paramount asked me if I'd stay around a little longer. They had a new pilot for a new series they thought could be big. They thought I'd be perfect for, called Love American Style. So that led to all the other shows, and Paramount became my home base for a number of years. I had an office and a piano, and I did a lot of work for movies and television, and of course, eventually for all the studios.
Now, you were nominated 4 different times with Love American Style, both, I guess, for the theme and for the score. What do you think made the music in the show so special and memorable from a composer's perspective?
I think first of all, I won the Emmy for the theme. Then in the 5th year, I think the Emmy for the scoring.
Yeah,
and I think I was nominated for the score every year anyway. I think I brought a new approach to it. I think I brought more of a pop music style to it, what we call contemporary. Everything contemporary. It just depends on, on the decade. What's contemporary now is no longer. But at the time, and there was a story about that. I have a clipping someplace. There was a story about the producer of the show said, we're bringing a young fellow composer over who's bringing a contemporary approach to scoring, which means instead of I had violins too, but instead of there was a rhythm section and there were nice feels and grooves and kind of more of a pop style. I think I was influenced by Burt Bacharach's music, Neil Hefti's music, and anyway, it was my own music. But you take your influences also where how you see yourself in the field of music. So I think I brought that, and it was very tuneful. And we eventually had an album. The song was on the Kaus's Greatest Hits album. Anyway, then after that, Paramount had a show called Happy Days. Was originally an episode of American Style. It's called Love in the Happy Days. And the ABC thought it was too soon to have revisit the 50s until George Lucas made American Graffiti.
Yep.
When he made American Graffiti, suddenly people thought about the 50s, and ABC said, well, we've got a show, let's give it a shot. Anyway, and then that broke open. Laverne and Shirley were 2 walk-ons who went on as love interests to Happy Days. That's all in my movie, by the way, the whole story about that. That came right on, and I had 2 hit records climbing up the charts at the same time. Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, and then Wonder Woman, and then Love Boat. So it's been a nice ride.
And one of the stops I wanted to make in this interview is with Puff and Stuff, because it's hard to imagine so much of your later work without your collaboration with Norman Gimbel. And I believe that was kind of what started it all for you guys. At what point did you finally meet Norman, and what do you remember about the first time you guys met?
I was asked for Universal asked me to do a musical film called Puff and Stuff. Sid and Marty Krofft. They had this big hit show called Puff and Stuff. And I'm not even sure why they didn't have the same composer wrote. I didn't write that song, Puff and Stuff. But they asked me to do it and write a whole bunch of new songs. I didn't have a lyricist I worked with at that time. And I was up at BMI Broadcast Music one day in New York, and I said I was looking for someone to collaborate with. And the head of BMI said, I know someone who'll be great for you. Norman Gimbel, who wrote Girl from Ipanema and a lot of the bossa nova hits. He wrote many hits. And so he called Norman right then, and we spoke. And we got together in California, and we hit it off right away. He was brilliant. He was together. He knew the form and structure of lyrics, content of the songs. So we talk about what a song should be, and he would write the lyric, I'd write the music. And then we'd bring in this singer, Jack Wilde, was Mama Cass, Cass Elliott, rather. Martha was in, and we wrote songs for all of them. It was a fun time for me. I still hadn't moved out to California. I was still commuting back and forth to New York and doing all this work. I had two shows, two shirts. I was doing the show called The Bugaloos. It was a children's show doing Love American Stone and writing music for Puff and stuff. It was kind of a wonderful beginning for me, in Hollywood.
Finishing working together for the very first time, did you kind of feel like you might have found a writing partner for life, or was it too early to tell at that
I know
point?
we did. No, I know we did.
You just clicked. You just knew it.
We clicked. We wrote songs right away, and I love what he gave me. He loved what I wrote back, and we'd collaborate together, sit around, we'd make up. Sometimes I'd drive him crazy, so he'd give me what he thought was the perfect lyric, and I would take it, and one line I liked so much, I had to double and triple up. I just needed to repeat it and go someplace. I needed a musical structure. So there's a lot of trust in writing songs together. He's got to trust me. I've got to trust him. And he'd get crazy. He said, I wrote it perfectly. Now I have to double up that line. But he always came up with it. And I got a name, Moving Me Down the Highway. I wrote again, Rolling Me Down the Highway wasn't part of the lyric.
Rolling me down. I know some.
Softly. It was Killing Me Softly with a song. That
Yep.
was his run. I wrote Killing Me Softly with his song, strung my whole life with his words, Killing Me Soft. I repeated it. I just needed it for the musical phrase. And of course he liked it, and all that. But it's a lot of trust involved in collaborating.
Well, and that segues kind of back into what we were talking about earlier, which was the theme song for Happy Days. Now, oddly enough, I think you guys were brought on after an earlier song had already been used, like in the intro to the show. So how did the job to write a new original theme song for the show come about? Was it because they decided to not have it be a one-off and make it a series, or was it something else entirely?
So we wrote Happy Days as a song. But in the movie American Graffiti, they used Rock Around the Clock.
Yeah.
The producer, Gary Marshall, Gary said, we need a song like Rock Around the Clock. So Norman said, Rock Around the Clock. It's something, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, rock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, rock. Why don't we do Sunday, Monday, Happy Days, Tuesday, Wednesday? It was that simple. So we try to emulate that. And of course the 50s didn't have a lot of very original chord structures. It's either blues changes, or 1 6 2 5 ba 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 bam. That was basically the chord structures of the 50s, most of the songs. So using that basis, I wrote it was supposed to sound like a leftover hit. Tom Miller, forgive me, my dear friend Tom Miller. Love him. Love Merck. So I mean, my producer in so many of those shows. So it was kind of followed suit. So we wrote that song very easily. When the show was picked up by ABC to go on the air, ABC said, or the producer said, we might as well go with Rock Around the Clock, because it's a big song. Why, use our new song, but let's relegate the new song to the end title, but keep Rock Around the Clock, because such a familiar approach. So at the end of the first year, the show was moderately successful, not a big hit. Fonz was not the star yet. Ron Howard was still the star, although they were both stars, obviously. But at the end of the first year, they were picked up for a second year, and they realized that the Fonz is getting a lot of cards and they're becoming very popular. Everyone loves the Fonz. So they kind of shifted it around, so it's more of an emphasis on the Fonz. Mainly, they took it out of a camera show that had to be cut, and they made it a 4-camera film show. They made it a 4-camera, I think it may have been 3-camera video show, live. Gary Marshall come out and get the audience into a laughing mood. And then the characters would come out live on stage and do it like it was a show. They do it live. And they thought, well, at the same time, we might as well go with our song. We have the Happy Days song. So the second year, they dumped Rock Around the Clock. And everything took off. Fonz became a star. Our record became a #1 record in many countries around the world. And we followed that with Laverne and Shirley, as I said. It's just there were fireworks involved, it just opened up. And we all we're very lucky about that, you know.
Well, plus if they phase out Rock Around the Clock, they didn't have to pay for that anymore, huh?
That is true too. Yeah. Well, you know what? The council did them Love American Style, and they called me after the first year, and I won the Emmy Award for that. They called me after the first year. They said the councils want too much money to continue. I don't know why they should have done that. Can you come up with a new group? So I said, I can use my studio singers and just do the same thing. I did slightly different. And then they said, well, what is the name of the group? I said, it doesn't really have a name. It's just the group. And they said, well, why not call it Charlie Fox Singers? So I became the Charlie Fox Singers.
That's funny. So when the Happy Days opportunity came about, how quickly was Norman also tapped to write it with you, or was he on board before you were?
In always old cases, I was hard to do the music, and I brought Norman on.
Got it.
He was my collaborator. Later on, I brought asked Paul Williams to do a movie called One on One with me, and we hit it off. And Paul, to this day, is one of my dearest friends. And then we did The Love Boat together.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I love Crabbe. I did a movie with Sammy Kahn. We wrote a bunch of songs together. And I worked with the Bergmans, you know, in songs. And I wrote a song with Carly Simon for a movie that she sang and I produced. It's been a wonderful experience. I wrote a couple songs with Carol Vea Sager for different shows. We had a show called Aloha Paradise, a song I wrote with Carol that Steve Lawrence sang. Every one of those songs bring back a memory for me. And this, people ask me all the time, what was my favorite song? What's my favorite? Each one denotes a moment in my life, a time with a person I worked with, and it all wonderful. I can't single out a song. Not that you've asked me. Sometimes people ask me.
It's kind of like trying to pick out which child is your favorite, right? So
I have no favorites. They all remind me as a part of my past. Unfortunately, they've all been nice experiences. They didn't all turn out to be hits, maybe, but still good experiences, you know.
Well, you know, I was thinking about, you know, a lot of these theme songs, you know, Making Our Dreams Come True for Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, Love Boat, a lot of these things, the earworm quality of those theme songs where it sticks in your head and you're still hearing it a day later, 2 days later, 3 days later. I mean, that's a fabulous to have the ability to be able to do that. It just, all of these different things, when you just start rattling off these things that you did, it's like, that ran through my head for weeks when I was a teenager or when I was in my 20s or when I was in my 30s. You know what I mean? And I just think that's so fabulous. I'd be remiss if we didn't close out the show by telling people that your new documentary, Killing Me Softly with His Songs, is now out on Amazon Prime. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of stops we could make and a lot of great stories we could tell, but they're all in the documentary. So I want our viewers to go watch it. And Charles, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's my pleasure too. And I'll just say, we just releasing now, coming out now, the soundtrack album of the film. That's also on Amazon. Well, it's on Apple computer too, Apple and those things. It's been a really interesting time for me in my life looking back. It's been an interesting time talking with you, David, too. I appreciate your questions. And
well, I appreciate it so much. Charles, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, composer Charles Fox.
Thank you.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to composer Charles Fox for joining us once again. Stay safe, everyone. Our featured guest tonight is a legend of the film, television, and recording industries, and his accomplishments have seen his life and career enshrined with the 2,777th star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You likely already know most of his songs, themes, and scores by heart, and they continue to leave indelible marks on pop culture. Here to chat about his incredible life, career, and brand new documentary, Killing Me Softly with His Songs, is none other than composer Charles Fox. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here with you, David.
So you've had one of the more storied careers I could ever imagine, but I honestly think some of the equally interesting parts of your story is how it all began. So I'd kind of like to start at the beginning, if I may. If I understand the story correctly, your father was a Jewish immigrant to the Bronx from Poland, right? And what was his story as he recounted it to you? How did he first arrive in America?